In the heart of British Columbia lies a land full of rich soil and unique wildlife. The glacial valley known as the Okanagan is a popular tourist destination in its summer months, when the sun is hot, the water is cool, and the wine is rich. Nowadays, this fragile desert housing many lush oases is under stress from our European influences. The surrounding land is very fertile despite its desert-like nature, which in turn has encouraged the growing of various different fruits, most prominent being grapes. With the Okanagan being a desert, water is an important factor. The beautiful land is a result of glaciers melting and leaving a massive lake that covered the entirety of the valley. Over time, this lake has dried out and left us with a nicely formed surrounding. The water in the lakes are thousands of years old, and have been used to keep the fragile ecosystem going for as long as it has existed. The problem is that nowadays we have inflicted damage to these ancient waterways, which in turn has disrupted the natural balance of the valley. Poison ivy is spread all around the open waters of the Okanagan, making themselves hidden to the human eye and blending in with the surrounding agriculture. Poison ivy is a deciduous scrub and will spread like wildfire in popular areas like roadsides, pathways, floods, and any damp areas, just as how it's scattered throughout the entire valley. Poison ivy tends to grow and spread in damp, warm areas, giving the plant a tendency to grow throughout our lakes and creek sides. Poison ivy gives harmful rashes that can be threatening to humans and sometimes fatal to our own pets. The rash is caused by oils the plant creates as a sort of defense to critters and animals that may be of harm to it. The problem is that it's hard to tell whether or not the plant is poison ivy, as it looks like most normal shrubs. The lake and vast connecting waterways are a great attraction for tourists and the avid boater. These boats helped in the distribution of an invasive species by carrying them from lake to lake, hidden from the human eye without any further inspection. Human activity aids in the slow depletion of the waterways in the form of irrigation for all the plants in various orchards and vineyards placed around the Okanagan, while ignorant persons dump their waste and harmful chemicals into lakes and rivers constantly every day. One of the problems we face is the invasive species of European milfoil, which, after being introduced to the waterways, have been growing out of control. They were first brought here from Europe to be used as decoration in aquariums, then were dumped into the lakes and rivers. The milfoil has caused many problems for the native species that are scattered throughout our ecosystem. The Okanagan is a very rich valley with lots of minerals in the surrounding land. Most of the nutrients find its way into the water, which the milfoil thrive off of, causing rapid plant growth and lack of oxygen in the water, which has a negative impact on how the organisms live in the water. One adaptation the European milfoil has is the ability to grow from tiny shreds of its parent's body, allowing it to grow and spread very rapidly if not handled properly. The European milfoil is now a large competitor with our native milfoil species that existed in our valley for many, many years. The sheer amount of this European invader allows them to block out sunlight and take a large portion of the nutrients away from our native milfoil. Before the invasive species came, our native species had good access to sunlight and adapted to having only 10 leaflets rather than the European variant, which has 12. Seemingly, this may seem as if it's not a big difference, but when in massive numbers like we have, it's a huge difference and a threat to our underwater agriculture. Geese are a wonderful example of how the native species in the Okanagan are a real problem to the surrounding ecosystem. According to local Canadian taxonomists, there are 11 native species of geese in Canada. In our Okanagan, we focus on the problem of Branta canadensis, the most known variation. During the summer, these geese create conflict with farmers and residents as they remain in the same general area year-round, grouping in large flocks, and only move around to find open water or sources of food. Here in the Okanagan, geese thrive as the large open areas of freshwater are scattered throughout the entire valley and they barely have to move from their luxury reserve. The geese never leave their families all year and have a dramatic size and population as they are able to sexually reproduce at the age of 2 years old. Geese love to feed on protein-rich foods, nest near open water or in large fields, which we have in the Okanagan. The geese swoop over open orchards, snacking on corn, soybeans, and wheat, destroying many crops in their paths. Another species negatively affected is our native sockeye salmon species, which from the lack of oxygen have been struggling to make it on their long journey to make it upstream and breed. These salmon have adapted to this long journey by having an internal organ system that can withstand the change from freshwater to saltwater, then back again. In order to do this, the salmon have developed specialized gills to take in sodium in freshwater and pump it out in saltwater. The salmon are a part of the foundation of the Okanagan's fragile ecosystem, and without them, the ecosystem will suffer and shrink, as well as possibly making some species go extinct. On the other side of the spectrum, a species that is thriving is the mosquito. The milfoil creates more areas of still water, which is the ideal breeding ground for mosquitoes. These numbers keep growing and growing due to sheer amounts of new baby mosquitoes being born. Mosquitoes are also notorious for transmitting diseases around an ecosystem, causing the other native species to be weaker and decrease their numbers. The mosquitoes have adapted to lay their eggs in still water in raft-like structures which thrive in still water. And of course, they're just really annoying. Overall, the Okanagan is one of the best areas to visit and have some of the best wildlife and sightseeing locations in Canada. The waterways of the Okanagan are an important factor for everything living here, including ourselves, and therefore must be protected.